Happy birthday to my wonderful mommy. I squinted at the card my 7-year-old daughter, Lily, had made for me. The colorful letters swam before my eyes, doubling and blurring until they became meaningless squiggles. What's wrong now? Mark, my husband of 9 years, sighed from across the kitchen. It's a simple birthday card, Sarah. I blinked hard, trying to force my eyes to focus. The words, they're just not clear. It's probably just stress from that promotion you're chasing, Mark dismissed, not looking up from his phone. You've been working too hard. Everything becomes a crisis when you're stressed. Lily's face fell as she watched me struggle with her card. Don't you like it, Mommy? Of course I do, sweetheart. I pulled her close, fighting back tears of frustration. I love all the colors you used. I'm just having trouble reading today. Again? Mark's voice carried that familiar tone of irritation. Maybe if you spent less time staring at spreadsheets and more time relaxing, you wouldn't have these episodes. Episodes. That's what he called the increasing frequency of my vision problems. The double vision that made driving dangerous. The blind spots that appeared without warning. The crushing headaches that followed. I have an appointment with Dr. Reynolds next week, I said quietly, still holding Lily. Mark rolled his eyes. Another doctor. Sarah, we've been through this. The optometrist said your eyes are fine. The GP said you're fine. You're just working too hard, I finished bitterly. Stressed? Imagining things. Well, if the shoe fits. He stood up, grabbing his car keys. I'm taking Lily to soccer practice. Try to relax while we're gone. Maybe take a nap or something. After they left, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at Lily's birthday card. The symptoms had started 3 months ago. Small things at first. Difficulty reading fine print, occasional blurriness. But it had progressively gotten worse. Last week, I had missed an important client presentation because I couldn't read the PowerPoint slides. My boss had been understanding, but Mark accused me of sabotaging my own career. You're just scared of success, he'd said. Creating obstacles so you have an excuse to stay in your comfort zone. My phone buzzed, a text from my sister Kate. How was Lily's card? Did you tell Mark about the MRI referral? I hadn't. Dr. Reynolds, my new neurologist, had called yesterday after reviewing my symptoms. He wanted an immediate MRI, his voice carrying an urgency that sent chills down my spine. Let's rule out some things, he'd said carefully. The way he said things made my stomach turn. I texted Kate back, not yet. He thinks it's all stress-related. Her response was immediate. He thought your gallbladder attack was stress too, until they had to remove it after it ruptured. She had a point. 2 years ago, I complained of severe abdominal pain. Mark had insisted it was just anxiety about Lily starting school. By the time he finally took me to the ER, my gallbladder had nearly burst. You worry too much, he'd said afterward. You always assume the worst. My phone buzzed again. Mark. Forgot Lily's water bottle. Can you bring it to the field? If you're not too dizzy to drive. The sarcasm in those quotation marks made my chest tight. I grabbed my keys and Lily's water bottle, then stopped at the front door. The doorknob had doubled, 2 brass handles swimming in my vision. I closed my eyes, counting to 10. When I opened them, the double vision had passed, but the familiar pressure was building behind my left eye. The drive to the soccer field was nerve-wracking. Street signs blurred, and twice I had to pull over when the world suddenly shifted sideways. At the field, I found Mark watching Lily's practice. What took so long? He demanded as I handed him the water bottle. Practice is almost over. I had to drive carefully, I said, my vision. Sarah, enough. He turned to face me, frustration evident. Do you know how exhausting this is? Every day there's something new wrong with you. First the headaches, then the dizziness, now you can't see properly. I have an MRI scheduled for tomorrow, I said quietly. Of course you do, he scoffed. More unnecessary medical bills because you've WebMD'd yourself into believing something's seriously wrong. The neurologist ordered it. I started to explain, but he cut me off. A neurologist? Seriously? Who's next? A brain surgeon? A witch doctor? Lily's coach blew the final whistle, and our daughter came running over, her ponytail bouncing. Mommy, did you see my goal? She asked excitedly. I hadn't. The truth was, I'd barely been able to distinguish her from the other little girls in blue uniforms. Sorry, sweetie, I just got here, I said, hating the disappointment on her face. Of course you missed it, Mark muttered. Too busy focusing on your symptoms. As we walked to our separate cars, my vision blurred again, but this time I couldn't tell if it was from the neurological symptoms or the tears I was fighting back. Tomorrow's MRI would change everything. I just didn't know how much. The MRI machine hummed around me, its rhythmic thumping matching my racing heart. Stay completely still, the technician had instructed, but my whole body trembled with a mixture of fear and vindication. Mark hadn't come with me. "You're being ridiculous," he'd said that morning, taking time off work for another wild goose chase. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I'd arrived at the hospital. "Hope you're enjoying your spa day at the imaging center." Lily's teacher called. "Thanks for making me handle it alone. When you're done playing patient, we need milk and bread." Each message made my chest tighter, but I couldn't respond now, sealed in this white tunnel with strict instructions not to move. 2 hours later, I sat in Dr. Reynolds' office, my hands clutched tightly in my lap. The neurologist's face was grave as he pulled up my scans on his computer screen. "Mrs. Walker," he began, then paused, choosing his words carefully. "We found something significant." He pointed to an area on the scan. "This is a tumor pressing on your optic nerve. Given its location and size, it explains the progressive vision problems you've been experiencing." The room seemed to tilt. "A tumor?" "Yes, and given its position, we need to move quickly. I've already contacted Dr. Zhang, one of our top neurosurgeons." My phone buzzed again. "Mark, done with your attention-seeking appointment yet?" Dr. Reynolds noticed my hands shaking. "Would you like me to call someone for you?" I nodded, unable to speak. He took my phone gently and dialed Mark's number, putting it on speaker. "Mr. Walker, this is Dr. Reynolds, your wife's neurologist at Metropolitan Hospital." "Let me guess." Mark's voice dripped with sarcasm. "She's convinced you something's terribly wrong." The doctor's expression hardened. "Actually, Mr. Walker, I'm calling because we found a significant brain tumor pressing on your wife's optic nerve. We need to schedule emergency surgery within the next 48 hours to prevent permanent blindness." Silence. "Mr. Walker, that's impossible," Mark stuttered. "She was just stressed." The other doctor said. "I'm looking at her MRI right now." Dr. Reynolds cut in firmly. "This is not stress, Mr. Walker. This is a serious medical condition that has likely been developing for months. Your wife needs immediate medical intervention." More silence, then the sound of keys jangling. "Which hospital?" "Metropolitan, 4th floor, neurology department." After hanging up, Dr. Reynolds turned to me. "The surgical team is ready to meet with you. Would you like to wait for your husband?" I nodded, still processing everything. A tumor. All those times I complained about my vision, all those times Mark had dismissed me. Mark arrived 30 minutes later, his face ashen. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me sitting with the surgical team, surrounded by brain scans and consent forms. "Sarah," he whispered. "Mr. Walker," Dr. Zhang interrupted. "Please join us. We were just explaining the surgical procedure to your wife." The surgeon pointed to various images, explaining how they would remove the tumor, the risks involved, the recovery process. Mark sank into a chair beside me, his hand reaching for mine, but I pulled away. "If left untreated," Dr. Zhang continued, "the tumor will cause permanent blindness. Even with immediate surgery, there may be some lasting vision deficits." Lasting effects. Mark's voice cracked. "But all those times," I told her it was nothing. "Unfortunately, dismissing neurological symptoms is quite common," Dr. Reynolds said pointedly. "Many patients face skepticism from family members until a crisis point is reached." Mark flinched at the implied criticism. "I'll need someone to care for me after the surgery," I said quietly. "Someone who will take my symptoms seriously." "I will," Mark said quickly. "Sarah, I'll take care of everything." "I've already called Kate," I interrupted. "She's taking time off work to stay with me." The hurt on his face was almost satisfying, but mostly it just made me tired. So tired of fighting to be believed, to be heard, to be taken seriously. "But I'm your husband," he protested weakly. "Yes," I agreed, "you are. And every time I needed you to believe me, to support me, to just listen to me, you chose not to." Dr. Zhang cleared her throat. "We need to discuss pre-surgical preparations. Mrs. Walker, would you prefer to have this conversation privately?" I looked at Mark, saw the guilt and fear warring on his face, and made a decision that had been months in the making. "Yes," I said, "I would." As Mark stepped out of the office, I caught a glimpse of him wiping his eyes. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to say it would all be okay. But another part, the part that had been silenced and dismissed for so long, knew that some things couldn't be fixed with simple apologies. Tomorrow, they would remove the tumor from my brain. But the damage to my marriage? That might be beyond repair. The weeks following brain surgery passed in a blur of recovery rooms, physical therapy, and uncomfortable silences. Mark hovered at the edges of my hospital room, while Kate took charge of my care, his presence a constant reminder of all the times he'd been absent when I truly needed him. Your vision should gradually improve, Dr. Zhang explained during a follow-up appointment. The surgery was successful, but healing takes time. Mark, sitting in the corner, spoke up hesitantly. And the headaches she was having? The ones I said were. He trailed off, unable to finish. Were also caused by the tumor, Dr. Zhang confirmed flatly, as were the dizzy spells, the fatigue, and the coordination issues you attributed to clumsiness. Each symptom she listed seemed to physically pain him. Good, I thought, then immediately felt guilty for the vindictive thought. Back at home, with Kate staying in our guest room, the dynamic was strained. Mark tried. God, he finally tried. He brought me water, checked my medication schedule, and drove me to appointments without a single sarcastic comment. But his efforts only highlighted how little support he'd offered before. One evening, I found him in Lily's room, holding her birthday card, the one I couldn't read. Daddy, why are you crying? Lily asked from the doorway, startling us both. Because I made some big mistakes, sweetheart, he answered, his voice rough. And I don't know how to fix them. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, he found me in the living room. I found these, he said, placing a stack of papers on the coffee table. They were printouts of his text messages to me over the past year. Playing patient again, another imaginary symptom. Drama queen mode activated. Reading them now, seeing his dismissive cruelty in black and white, made my surgical scar throb. I was awful, he whispered. I was worse than awful. I was abusive. The word hung heavy in the air between us. It was the first time either of us had named it for what it was. Why? I asked, the question that had haunted me through my recovery. Why was it easier to believe I was lying than sick? He sat heavily on the couch, keeping his distance. I told myself I was being practical, level-headed, that you were the emotional one, the anxious one. He paused, struggling. But the truth is, I was scared. Every time you said something was wrong, I shut it down because I couldn't handle the possibility of you being seriously ill. So you made me handle it alone. Yes, he wiped his eyes. I convinced myself I was helping you by not feeding into your fears. Instead, I just made you suffer in silence. Kate appeared in the doorway, her expression protective. Sarah needs to rest. But I shook my head. It's okay, Kate. We need to have this conversation. After she reluctantly left, Mark pulled out one last paper, a referral to a marriage counselor. I know it might be too late, he said quietly. I know I might have destroyed any trust you had in me. But if you're willing to try, I want to learn how to be the husband you deserved all along. I looked at the referral, thinking about all the moments that had led us here, the dismissed symptoms, the mocking texts, the lonely doctor's appointments. I can't make any promises, I said finally, but I'm willing to try counseling. His relief was palpable, but I held up my hand. On one condition. Anything. You need individual therapy too, because this wasn't just about my illness. This was about your need to control situations by dismissing them. And I won't risk Lily growing up thinking that's how relationships work. He nodded, tears falling freely now. I've already started. 2 sessions so far. That surprised me. You have? The day of your surgery, watching them wheel you away. He swallowed hard. I realized I might lose you, either to the tumor I ignored or to the damage I caused. I found a therapist that afternoon. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of years of dismissal and denial between us. I saw the goal, he said suddenly. What? At Lily's soccer game, the day before your MRI. When you said you missed her goal. I saw it, and I didn't even think to describe it to you. I just judged you for missing it. Such a small thing, but it symbolized so much. She was wearing her lucky blue headband, he continued, voice breaking. She dribbled past 2 defenders and scored from the left side of the field. She did this little victory dance afterward. You should have seen it. You would have seen it if I had believed you sooner. I reached out and took his hand, the first voluntary contact since the diagnosis. "Tell me more," I whispered. "Tell me everything I missed while you were busy telling me nothing was wrong." And as he described every detail of our daughter's triumph, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for us after all. Not because he was finally paying attention to me, but because he was finally paying attention to himself and the harm he had caused. The tumor they removed from my brain hadn't just been killing my vision, it had been killing our marriage. Now that both were healing, we could finally begin to see each other clearly. Hi, I'm Rachel Thompson, 38, and I have a story that still makes my blood boil. After my son Tommy's superhero-themed birthday party, a day I poured my heart into, my mother-in-law Helen secretly packed up all his presents and gave them to my sister-in-law Amy's son, Cooper, claiming he needed them more since his parents are divorcing. The party itself was magical. Tommy had been counting down for weeks, and the backyard had been transformed into a miniature Avengers headquarters. Red and blue balloon arches swayed in the breeze, cardboard cutouts of Iron Man and Captain America guarded the snack table, and superhero-themed music played softly in the background. "Mom, this is awesome." Tommy grinned, hugging me tight in his slightly oversized Spider-Man costume. His joy made every late night of planning worth it. "Only the best for my superhero," I smiled, adjusting his mask. But my smile faltered when Helen marched through the gate, trailed by Amy. Both were dressed in expensive sundresses, clearly ignoring my costume's encouraged request. "Rachel, dear," Helen began, her tone dripping with her usual condescension. "Couldn't you have done this at that indoor venue I mentioned? All this," she waved at the decorations, "seems a bit much for a child's party." Before I could respond, Tommy rushed over. "Grandma, Aunt Amy, look, I'm Spider-Man." Helen gave him a tight-lipped smile. "Yes, dear, though I must say, Cooper would have loved this theme too." Amy chimed in, her voice sugary sweet. "Poor Cooper was so disappointed he couldn't come. The divorce has been really hard on him, you know." I bit back my frustration. This was Tommy's day, not a therapy session for Cooper. "Well, Tommy's been looking forward to celebrating with his friends," I said firmly. "The kids should be arriving any minute." And soon they did. The yard filled with laughter as mini superheroes raced around, their faces painted with Iron Man masks and Captain America shields. Tommy's smile never wavered as we sang Happy Birthday and cut the cake. But Helen's presence loomed like a storm cloud. She cornered me by the drinks table. "Rachel, don't you think this is a bit excessive? Cooper never had such an elaborate party. And now, with everything going on." I took a deep breath. "This is Tommy's day, Helen. He's had a rough year with bullying, and—" Helen scoffed. "Oh, please. A few playground squabbles hardly compare to a divorce. Cooper is experiencing real trauma." I bit my tongue and returned to the party, determined not to let her ruin Tommy's special day. He was glowing as he opened each gift, marveling at action figures, Lego sets, and superhero gear. But Helen and Amy exchanged whispers and glances at the growing pile of presents. When the party ended, Helen offered to help clean up. "You must be exhausted, dear," she said, unusually sweet. "Amy and I can pack up the presents while you handle the goodie bags." Something felt off, but with kids running around and parents saying their goodbyes, I let it go. Later that evening, after Tommy had crashed in his Spider-Man costume, I went to bring his presents to his room, but the table where they'd been stacked was empty. "Mark," I called to my husband, trying to stay calm, "did your mom bring Tommy's presents inside?" Mark frowned. "She said she was loading them into her car to help us." My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone and called Helen. "Of those presents," she said, as if we were discussing the weather, "I took them to Cooper's house. Poor boy needed cheering up, and Tommy had so many. It's good to teach kids about sharing." I was shaking. "You what?" "Those weren't yours to give away. They were Tommy's birthday gifts. His friends picked those out for him." "Now don't be dramatic," she replied dismissively. "Cooper's already opened them, and really, Rachel, it's a valuable lesson in generosity for Tommy." I hung up, seething. Mark, hearing everything, grabbed his phone. "She's gone too far this time," he muttered. But all I could think about was how I'd explain this to Tommy in the morning. Helen hadn't just stolen his gifts. She'd taken a piece of his joy, a piece of a memory I'd worked so hard to give him. And this time, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The next morning, Tommy's heartache became my motivation. As I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, Mark placed a cup of coffee in front of me. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low so as not to wake Tommy. I nodded. She needs to understand the damage she's caused. If Helen won't respect our boundaries, maybe public accountability will make her think twice before pulling something like this again. I opened a blank document and started typing. An open letter to Helen Thompson. "Dear Helen, yesterday, my son Tommy woke up excited to play with the birthday presents his friends had lovingly chosen for him. But instead of the joy and excitement he deserved, he was met with confusion and heartbreak. Why? Because you decided to take all his gifts and give them to his cousin, Cooper, without permission. You've always favored Cooper, and we've stayed quiet for years, hoping you'd change. But this time, your actions didn't just hurt me. They hurt a little boy who sees you as his grandmother, someone he's supposed to trust. Those gifts weren't just toys. They were tokens of love from children who care about Tommy. Gifts like the Legio Avengers set Jake spent weeks saving for because Tommy helped him when he was being bullied. Or the limited edition Spider-Man figure Sam picked out because Tommy once shared his lunch with him. By giving those gifts to Cooper, you dismissed not only Tommy's feelings but also the thoughtfulness and generosity of the children who gave them. You tried to teach Tommy a lesson about generosity. But maybe it's you who needs the lesson. About boundaries, respect, and fairness. I've spent years biting my tongue, enduring your subtle criticisms and favoritism. But you've gone too far. It's time for you to take responsibility and make this right. Return the gifts, apologize to Tommy, and show him that his feelings matter. Sincerely, Rachel. Mark read over my shoulder as I finished typing. This is good, but are you sure this will work? It's not just about her anymore, I said, my voice steady. It's about showing Tommy that we'll fight for him, even when the odds feel stacked against us. I posted the letter on my social media and in a local parenting group. Within hours, the post started gaining traction. Comments poured in from other parents, offering their support and sharing their own stories of difficult family dynamics. This is heartbreaking. Tommy deserves better. Good for you for standing up for your son. This is appalling. I hope Helen realizes how wrong she was. By the afternoon, the post had been shared dozens of times, and Helen's reputation was taking a hit. Several of her friends, who followed me on social media, messaged her directly. One even commented publicly, "Helen, this is unacceptable. How could you do this to your own grandson?" Helen called that evening, her tone dripping with indignation. "Rachel, what have you done? People are calling me, asking if this is true." "It is true, Helen," I said calmly. "And maybe now you'll understand how serious this is. You hurt Tommy and you need to fix it." "I can't believe you humiliate me like this," she snapped. "Humiliation wasn't my goal," I replied. "But accountability was. This isn't just about Tommy's presence, it's about how you treat him. If you want this to stop, make it right." Helen sputtered excuses but eventually hung up. An hour later, Mark's phone buzzed with a text. A photo of the gifts loaded back into Helen's car, along with a terse message. "I'll bring them by tomorrow." The next morning, Helen arrived with the presents, her face tight with anger. Tommy, still cautious, hesitated when she walked in. But when she handed him the first gift and muttered an apology, his face lit up. After she left, Mark and I sat Tommy down. "Listen, sweetheart," I said, holding his hand. "Grandma made a mistake, but your feelings matter, and we made sure she knew that. You should never be afraid to stand up for yourself." Tommy nodded solemnly, then tore into his presents with renewed excitement. As he showed me each one, my heart swelled. He hadn't just gotten his gifts back, he'd gotten back the joy Helen tried to steal from him. And as for Helen, she stayed distant for a while after that, her pride no doubt bruised. But one thing was clear. I wouldn't be silent anymore when it came to protecting my son. I started with a single post in our community Facebook group, a hub of 15,000 local parents who shared advice, recommendations, and event updates. My message was concise but factual. Warning about birthday party theft. My mother-in-law stole my 7-year-old's birthday presents to give to another grandchild. Parents, please be aware that your children's thoughtful gifts were taken without permission. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, parents from Tommy's party began commenting, sharing the special meaning behind the stolen gifts. Jake's mom, Lisa, described how her son had saved his allowance for weeks to buy Tommy the LEGO set. Another parent talked about searching for the limited edition Spider-Man toy Tommy had mentioned loving. Screenshots of the post spread beyond our local group. Soon, the story had reached Helen's precious country club circles, where her reputation was everything. At 8 a.m. the next morning, my phone rang. It was Margaret, Helen's best friend from the club. "Helen, why am I hearing that you stole children's birthday presents? Please tell me this isn't true." Before Helen could contain the damage, the floodgates opened. The president of her charity board called. Her bridge club, even her pastor, her carefully curated image as the gracious, charitable matriarch was unraveling. Later that day, Amy showed up at our door, pale and trembling. "The moms at Cooper's school are furious. They're saying Cooper can't come to birthday parties because we steal presents. You have to take down the post." I stared at her, incredulous. "Like you took down the photos of Cooper posing with Tommy's stolen presents?" I asked coldly. "Those gifts meant something to every child who gave them. They weren't yours to take." Amy tried to argue. "Cooper's been having such a hard time since the divorce." "Stop using your divorce as an excuse," I snapped, cutting her off. "Tommy's been bullied at school for months. Did you or Helen ever care about that?" "No, because Tommy's not your perfect golden child. He's just the one you can ignore." Amy's face crumpled. For a moment, I thought she might defend herself. But instead, she whispered, "I didn't think about it that way. Cooper was upset, and Mom said this would make him feel better." "And did it?" Mark asked, stepping in. "Did stealing from Tommy fix anything for Cooper?" Before Amy could answer, the doorbell rang. Helen stood there, looking disheveled, an unusual sight for her. She marched inside without an invitation. "You need to fix this," she demanded. "My reputation." "It's exactly what you deserve," Mark interrupted sharply. "Remember when Tommy was being bullied and you said he needed to toughen up? Meanwhile, you coddle Cooper for every little thing." "Cooper's situation is different," Helen argued. "Yes, it is," I said quietly, my voice steady. "Cooper has two parents who love him and are going through a tough time. Tommy has a grandmother who makes him feel like he doesn't matter." My words seemed to land. Helen's bravado faltered, and she sank into the couch, looking older than I'd ever seen her. "I just wanted to help Cooper," she murmured. "By hurting Tommy," Mark pressed. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of small footsteps. Tommy stood in the doorway, still in his Spider-Man pajamas, his face uncertain. Helen looked at him, really looked at him, for what felt like the first time. "I'm sorry, Tommy," she said, her voice trembling. "Grandma made a big mistake." An hour later, Helen returned with all of Tommy's presents. Some were already opened, but they were all there. She even wrote a public apology on my Facebook post, admitting her actions and promising to make amends. 2 weeks later, Helen showed up with 2 identical Avengers Lego sets, one for Tommy, one for Cooper. She hesitated at the door. Maybe the boys could build them together. Tommy looked at me, seeking permission. I smiled and nodded. His face lit up. "Cooper can come over. I'll show him my superhero headquarters." As the boys played, Helen sat beside me, her hands twisting in her lap. "I've been unfair," she admitted softly, "to all of you. I was so focused on Cooper's pain that I didn't see what I was doing to Tommy, or to you. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Years of favoritism had left scars, and trust wouldn't be rebuilt overnight." But as I watched Tommy excitedly showing Cooper his superhero collection, I felt a flicker of hope. Sometimes it takes a public fall from grace to confront private failings. Helen had learned that the hard way. But more importantly, Tommy learned that his feelings mattered, and that his parents would always fight for him, no matter who stood in the way. What about you? Would you have exposed Helen's actions publicly or tried to handle it privately? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hi, I'm Sarah Martinez, 32 years old, and the day I discovered my mother-in-law had been posting fake reviews and filing anonymous complaints against my salon to teach me humility was the day our family's polished facade finally shattered. You've seen those perfect family portraits, everyone smiling, but the tension behind the grins is thick enough to cut with scissors. That was us, the Martinez family, ruled by Eleanor, my mother-in-law, and the self-proclaimed queen of suburban perfection. David and I met at cosmetology school. I was there to pursue my dream of owning a salon. while he was studying business to help manage Eleanor's chain of high-end boutiques. On our first date, he said, "You're different. Mom will love that you're so entrepreneurial." Oh, how wrong he was. At first, Eleanor seemed welcoming. During our engagement, she popped into my little starter salon with her signature tight-lipped smile. "Darling, have you thought about moving to a more upscale location? This neighborhood is a bit quaint," she'd say, her tone dripping with artificial sweetness. After the wedding, the gloves came off. My salon, Style and Grace, was thriving. Local magazines featured us, and my Instagram following soared. That's when Eleanor's helpful suggestions turned into overt criticism. A Martinez business should exude sophistication, she'd remark at Sunday dinners, eyeing photos of my bright, modern salon. "Your prices are embarrassingly low, Sarah. It's not a good look for the family." I stood my ground. My salon was about making beauty accessible, not exclusive. Clients loved our warm, welcoming atmosphere and honest pricing. We were booked solid for months. Then came the reviews. The first one hit like a punch. "Horrible experience. The owner is unprofessional and the salon is filthy. Don't waste your money." I was devastated. I prided myself on spotless standards and exceptional service. More followed on Yelp, Google, and even local business directories. Cancellations poured in. Clients vanished. "Maybe it's a sign," Eleanor mused over dinner, barely hiding her smirk. "The beauty industry is so fickle. David's boutiques always need managers." I spent sleepless nights poring over security footage, racking my brain for answers. David tried to comfort me, torn between my distress and his mother's influence. "Mom's just old-fashioned," he'd say. "She means well." The breaking point came with a letter from the licensing board. Multiple complaints about health code violations. We faced an emergency inspection. On the busiest Saturday, an inspector combed through every corner of my salon. We passed, but the damage to our reputation was done. Something about the complaints nagged at me, the wording, the specifics. They echoed Eleanor's advice emails. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I started digging. Eleanor wasn't as tech-savvy as she thought. She'd used the same email address to create multiple accounts, leaving a trail easy enough to follow. The final confirmation came when my friend Lisa, who worked at the licensing board, mentioned Eleanor's recent visit. She seemed really concerned about salon regulations, Lisa said. Kept asking how to file anonymous complaints. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. For years, I'd endured her veiled insults, her attempts to shape me into her vision of a proper Martinez wife. But sabotaging my livelihood, my dream, this was different. This was war. Eleanor's 60th birthday party loomed, a grand affair she'd been planning for months, the crown jewel of her social calendar. Every detail was orchestrated for maximum admiration. She had no idea I'd been planning something too. With all the evidence stored safely on my phone, I was ready. Sometimes the best way to deal with toxic people is to shine a light on their darkest deeds. And this time, I wasn't going to play the dutiful daughter-in-law. Eleanor's birthday party was every bit as extravagant as I'd expected, held at the Crystal Lake Country Club, complete with champagne fountains, a string orchestra, and a guest list that read like a who's who of the local elite. It was her moment to bask in admiration, the queen of her carefully curated kingdom. I arrived wearing the designer dress Eleanor had all but demanded I wear. David gave my hand a reassuring squeeze as we entered. "Mom will love that you wore it," he said, completely unaware of the storm brewing. Eleanor greeted guests at the entrance, radiating practiced charm. When her eyes landed on us, her smile tightened just enough for me to notice. "Sarah, darling, you gobbed on yourself tonight," she said, air kissing my cheek. "I almost didn't recognize you." Then, turning to David, "Sweetheart, the Hendersons are dying to discuss their daughter's wedding boutique. Would you mind?" Typical Eleanor, separating us the moment we arrived. But tonight, I didn't mind. I needed her distracted. I slipped away to the tech booth where the slideshow was being cued. Tom, the AV guy and a former client, greeted me. "I added those extra slides you sent," he said, "right after the childhood photos, just like you asked." "Perfect," I replied, steadying my nerves. Tonight, the truth was coming out. The evening unfolded like clockwork. Eleanor floated through dinner, glowing under the praise of speeches and toasts. Finally, the MC took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, a special presentation for our birthday girl, Eleanor Martinez." The lights dimmed. A soft piano melody played as photos of Eleanor's life filled the screen. Her childhood, her wedding, the grand opening of her first boutique. Then came photos of her with David and later, our wedding. The next slide changed everything. A screenshot of a scathing Yelp review appeared, followed by another, and then another. Next came screenshots of the email confirmations tied to the fake accounts. The images of her entering the licensing board office played next, followed by copies of the anonymous complaints she'd filed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. What is this? Eleanor's voice sliced through the stunned silence. Turn it off. Turn it off right now. But the final blow was a recording. Eleanor's unmistakable voice saying, "Of course I'm leaving bad reviews. Someone needs to teach that girl some humility. She's ruining the Martinez name with her cheap little salon." Eleanor shot to her feet, her chair clattering to the floor. "You," she screamed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "How dare you humiliate me like this?" I stayed calm, though my heart was racing. "Humiliate you? Like you've been trying to ruin my business." Eleanor stormed toward me, heels clicking against the marble floor. "Everything I did was to protect this family's reputation. Your discount prices and cheap clientele." "My clients," I interrupted, "are hard-working people who deserve to feel beautiful without going bankrupt. Something you'd understand if you weren't so obsessed with appearances." Slap. The sound echoed through the ballroom, and my cheek stung where her hand had landed. Shocked murmurs rippled through the room. "Mother." David's voice boomed. He was at my side in seconds, glaring at Eleanor. "She's trying to destroy me," Eleanor shrieked, gesturing wildly. "On my birthday, after everything I've done for her." "Done for me?" I laughed bitterly, touching my cheek. "You mean sabotaging my business, filing false reports, and trying to have my license revoked. Is this true, Eleanor?" Richard Henderson, head of the local business association, stepped forward, his tone sharp. "Filing false complaints is serious." Eleanor's mask cracked. Her usual composure dissolved into panic. "I can explain. Sarah doesn't understand our standards." "Your standards?" David's voice was icy. "Mom, you've been sabotaging my wife's dream, her business, our livelihood." "I was protecting you," Eleanor cried. "She's beneath us. Her little salon is an embarrassment." David stared at her, disgusted. "The only embarrassment here is you." He turned to me. "Come on, Sarah. We're done." "If you walk out that door," Eleanor spat, "don't bother coming back." David paused, looking over his shoulder. "Back to what? More sabotage? More manipulation? No thanks." As we left, the whispers followed us. Eleanor's meticulously planned evening had unraveled into a public disaster, the very thing she tried to do to me. In the car, David was silent for a long time. Finally, he asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at him, the weight of years of tension pressing down. "Would you have believed me?" His silence was answer enough. The weeks after Eleanor's birthday debacle were a whirlwind. News of the spectacle spread like wildfire through our small business community, leaving her carefully constructed social empire in shambles. The very next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Local reporters requested statements, business owners called to apologize for believing the fake reviews, and our online booking system lit up with a flood of appointments. "Mrs. Martinez," Lisa, my salon manager, exclaimed one morning. "We're completely booked out for 6 months." I smiled, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. But the most surprising visitor came a week later, Richard Henderson. He walked into the salon, looking distinctly uncomfortable amid the vibrant modern decor. "Mrs. Martinez, Sarah," he began, loosening his tie. "The Business Association reviewed the evidence you submitted, filing false reports, fabricating reviews. These actions breach multiple ethical standards. We voted to revoke Eleanor's membership and business privileges." I blinked. "All of them?" He nodded gravely. "Her boutiques will need new management. For the sake of the community, we believe it's necessary." That evening, David came home looking drained. "Mom's boutiques are falling apart," he admitted. "Clients are canceling their orders, staff are walking out. She wants me to step in, take over, and save the family business." "And what did you say?" I asked softly. He sighed, meeting my gaze. "I told her no, I'm done enabling her. But I do have an idea, if you're willing to hear me out." His idea was ambitious: rebrand Eleanor's boutiques into affordable luxury stores, partnering with my salon to create complete makeover experiences. Your vision, Sarah, he said. Your business model, but scaled up. We can make the Martinez name mean something positive. I stared at him stunned. You really want to work together on this? David nodded. Watching how you treat people, how you run your salon, I want to be part of that. It's time for a fresh start, for all of us. Meanwhile, Eleanor struggled to cope with her fall from grace. Her attempts to rally support among her friends were met with polite refusals. Her country club membership was quietly revoked, and even her bridge club replaced her with a new fourth. The consequences weren't just social. The licensing board issued hefty fines and demanded a public apology. That Monday morning, Eleanor arrived at my salon for the press conference, dressed in last season's designer wear, a clear sign of her decline. She stood before the gathered reporters and business owners, hands trembling as she read from a prepared statement. I let my pride cloud my judgment, she began. My actions were wrong and caused unjust harm to a legitimate business. I deeply regret. I watched, arms crossed, as she stumbled through the rest of her apology. When the cameras left, she lingered, hesitant. I don't understand, she said quietly. Everything I did was to protect this family's reputation, to keep us on top. No, I replied, straightening a display of styling products. You did it because you couldn't handle someone else succeeding, especially not me. Her expression crumbled. And now I've lost everything. You lost it because of your own choices, I said firmly. But hitting rock bottom has one advantage: you can only go up from here. She looked at me sharply, suspicion flickering in her eyes. What are you saying? David and I are restructuring the boutiques. We could use someone with experience in high-end retail as a consultant, not an owner. You have to follow new rules, including no interference in day-to-day operations. You give me a chance. After everything I did to you. Everyone deserves the shot at redemption, I said, meeting her gaze. But there will be contracts. Strict contracts. 6 months later, our rebranded business, Style and Grace Boutique Experience, was thriving. The concept of affordable luxury paired with personal care resonated with our community. Eleanor, under close supervision, proved surprisingly adept at training staff on high-end customer service. One quiet evening, David and I toasted our success over dinner at home. You know, he said, pouring wine, the night you stood up to Mom, that was the proudest I've ever been to call you my wife. I smiled, thinking of everything we'd endured. Sometimes, the hardest moments bring the most important changes. Just then, my phone buzzed with a new review notification. 5 stars for one of our new boutique locations. The reviewer, Eleanor Martinez. Outstanding service, excellent value, and a welcoming atmosphere for all clients. The Martinez family legacy has truly evolved. I showed the review to David, and we both laughed. Sometimes the biggest wake-up call is exactly what someone needs to finally change. What about you? Would you have handled things differently or done the same? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hi, I'm Catherine Lee, and I froze mid-step as I spotted my husband's ex-girlfriend, Jessica, casually seated at our backyard table. Apparently, my mother-in-law, Margaret, decided our son's 10th birthday party was the perfect opportunity to stage an impromptu reunion. The thought of consulting me, his actual mother, must not have crossed her mind. Jessica looked exactly like she did in the countless photos Margaret kept prominently displayed in her home, photos she conveniently forgot to remove, even after Mike and I married 7 years ago. The same perfect blonde hair, that rehearsed smile, and a designer dress so polished it probably cost more than the entire party budget. Isn't this wonderful? Margaret's voice chirped behind me, her hand clamping onto my shoulder like a vice. Jessica was in town, and I thought Tommy would just love to meet her. After all, she was such an important part of Mike's life during college. I glanced over and saw my son Tommy showing Jessica his new science kit. His face glowed with excitement while Mike stood a few steps away, looking like a schoolboy caught sneaking out of class. That guilty expression of his, it was the same one he wore every time Margaret bulldozed over my feelings. Margaret, I said through clenched teeth, could we speak inside for a moment? In the kitchen, I folded my arms tightly, trying to rein in my frustration. Why would you invite Mike's ex to our son's birthday party without discussing it with us first? Margaret waved a manicured hand dismissively. Oh, Catherine, don't be so sensitive. Jessica's family has known Mike since childhood. Her father and my late husband were business partners. She's practically family. And I'm not? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Margaret tilted her head, her pearls glinting under the light. While she sniffed, Jessica just understands us, our traditions, our world. She grew up in it. You're different, dear. Different. The polite way to say I wasn't good enough. The woman from a modest background who, in Margaret's eyes, had derailed her son's perfect future. Through the window, I saw Jessica laugh at something Mike said, her hand brushing his arm with a casual familiarity. Meanwhile, Tommy eagerly showed her his birthday presents, and she nodded with exaggerated interest, playing the role of the doting almost stepmother. Besides, Margaret continued, Tommy should know about his father's past. Jessica was going to be his mother, after all, before you came along. The room spun slightly. What do you mean, was going to be his mother? Margaret's eyes widened in mock surprise. Oh dear, didn't Mike tell you? He and Jessica were briefly engaged before you. They had it all planned, the house, the future, even their children's names. Why, Tommy was Jessica's choice. She's always adored that name. Tommy, the name Mike and I had supposedly chosen together. The name that honored my late father, who never got to meet his grandson. Catherine? Mike's voice carried from the yard. Tommy wants to cut the cake. Forcing a smile, I returned to the party with a Superman cake. I'd stayed up until 2 a.m. decorating. Guests gathered around the table as I set it down. But before I could light the candles, Jessica's voice cut through the chatter. Oh, Tommy, she cooed, did you know your dad used to make the most amazing superhero cakes? My mom's pastry chef taught him during one of our family vacations. I almost dropped the knife. Mike had told me he'd never baked before we met. Mom, Tommy tugged at my sleeve, his wide eyes full of hope. Can Jessica come to my next birthday too? She promised to tell me more stories about when Dad was younger. Margaret beamed across the table, the picture of triumph. What a splendid idea. Family should stick together, don't you think, Catherine? I stood there, cake knife in hand, as cracks began to form in the carefully built world I thought was mine. This wasn't just about a surprise guest anymore. This was about my place in my own family's story, and apparently, I'd been cast in a much smaller role than I'd imagined. What I didn't realize at the time was that this birthday party was just the opening act in Margaret's plan to rewrite our family's future. The week after Tommy's birthday felt like sinking into quicksand. Each morning, I'd wait to find new photos on Margaret's Facebook page, carefully curated shots of Jessica with Tommy, Jessica with Mike, all captioned with gems like family memories, #birthday fun, #family first. Conveniently, I wasn't in any of them. But it was the text messages that really got under my skin. Tommy had such a wonderful time with Jessica. Margaret wrote. She's offered to help with his science fair project. Isn't that thoughtful? After all, with her PhD in chemistry, she's much more qualified than, well, you know. I set my phone down at my desk during lunch break, my appetite gone. A knock at my classroom door startled me. Mrs. Lee. It was Sarah, the mother of Tommy's best friend. Her expression made my stomach drop. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, Sarah began, closing the door behind her. But yesterday at soccer practice, your mother-in-law was there, with another woman. They were talking to the other parents about Tommy's real family background. My throat tightened. What did they say? Sarah hesitated, glancing at the floor. Margaret was showing old photos, saying Jessica comes from this prestigious family and how she and Mike were meant to be together, until you came between them. I clenched the edge of my desk. Anything else? She sighed. She mentioned custody arrangements, something about how, since Jessica picked Tommy's name and has a deep history with Mike, she might have a case for visitation rights. Custody arrangements, the room tilted, and I gripped my desk harder. That evening, I confronted Mike in the kitchen. He was cooking, something he'd started doing ever since Jessica casually mentioned her culinary skills at the party. Did you know your mother's spreading rumors about custody rights? I asked, my voice strained. Mike froze mid-stir, the spoon clattering against the pan. She's what? Apparently, she and Jessica told parents at soccer practice about legal arrangements. Care to explain? He ran a hand through his hair, a dead giveaway of his nerves. Look, Mom's just having a hard time letting go. Jessica was around for a long time, and what about the engagement? I cut him off. Were you ever going to tell me about that? The silence was deafening. It wasn't serious, he mumbled at last. We were young. Not serious. You planned our son's name with her. That's not fair, he said quickly. Yes, Jessica liked the name Tommy, but I chose it with you because of your dad. It wasn't about her. Then why is she suddenly everywhere? Soccer practice, school events, Margaret's practically running a PR campaign for your ex-girlfriend. Mike set down the spatula, his face pale. Maybe we should invite them both over for dinner? Clear the air. I stared at him in disbelief. Dinner? Your mother invited your ex to our son's birthday without telling me, is spreading rumors about custody rights, and your solution is dinner. They're not rumors if there's some truth to them, came a voice from the doorway. We both turned to see Margaret standing there, house key in hand, the emergency key we'd given her for actual emergencies. What are you doing here? I demanded. Margaret strode in, placing a manila envelope on the counter. Jessica's family lawyer drew these up. Given her history with Mike and her connection to Tommy's name, he thinks she might have a case for visitation rights. Mike looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Mom, that's insane. Jessica has no legal rights to Tommy. Margaret's smile was razor sharp. Not yet. But considering your hasty marriage to Catherine and Jessica's long-standing place in the family, the courts might see it differently. Get out, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. Margaret blinked. Excuse me? Take your papers and get out of my house. Her face hardened. Catherine, don't be difficult. We're just trying to do what's best for Tommy. A child needs the right influences, people who understand family legacy. I grabbed the envelope, tore it in half, and shoved it into her hands. My son has all the influence he needs. Leave or I'll call the police. Margaret's parting words stung as she walked out the door. This isn't over, dear. Jessica's family has excellent lawyers. I turned to Mike, who was still frozen in place. You need to decide, right now, if you're going to let your mother destroy our family for some fantasy about Jessica. Because I won't stand for it. The smoke alarm blared, the smell of burning food filling the kitchen. Dinner was ruined, and it felt like my marriage might be going up in flames right along with it. The breaking point came 3 days later at Tommy's science fair. I'd taken the afternoon off from teaching to help set up his volcano project, the one we'd spent weeks perfecting together. But when we arrived at the school gym, Jessica was already there, standing next to our table, with a completely different project. Look, Mom, Tommy exclaimed, running ahead. Jessica helped me make a real chemical reaction. It's way cooler than a volcano. My heart sank as I saw our carefully crafted volcano shoved under the table, replaced by an elaborate chemistry setup that screamed professional adult help. Margaret hovered nearby, phone poised to capture the moment. Isn't it wonderful? She beamed. Jessica spent all weekend working on this with Tommy. She picked him up after soccer practice. I told the school I'd authorized it. The room spun. You did what? Oh, Catherine. Jessica stepped forward, her voice dripping with Fox sympathy. Didn't Mike tell you? Margaret added me to Tommy's approved pickup list, as a family friend. That was it. Something inside me snapped. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I should have called weeks ago. Sarah, remember that lawyer friend you mentioned? The one who specializes in family law? I need her number. Now. The next morning, Mike woke to divorce papers on his bedside table. What is this? He asked, his face pale. A choice. I replied calmly. You can either stand up to your mother and Jessica right now, or you can explain to a judge why you let them harass and undermine your wife. I pulled out a folder and laid it beside the papers. Here's documentation of every unauthorized pickup from school, every manipulative text from your mother, every social media post trying to erase me from my own family, plus statements from other parents about the custody rumors. Mike sat heavily on the bed. Catherine, I never meet. I also have proof that Jessica's family lawyer isn't licensed in our state. Those custody papers, complete fabrication. Your mother committed fraud presenting them as legal documents. His head snapped up. What? So here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to call your mother and Jessica, put them on speaker, and you're going to end this. 20 minutes later, Margaret's voice filled the room. Mike, darling, what's this about? Mom, Mike said, his voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. You need to stop. No more unauthorized pickups. No more surprise visits. No more Jessica. If you keep this up, Catherine will file for a restraining order against both of you. But Tommy's science project, Jessica began. One about 4 hours ago, I cut in with the volcano we made together. Turns out the judges prefer projects actually made by students over ones manufactured by overstepping adults. Silence. And Margaret, I added, the school is investigating how an unauthorized adult removed my son from campus. Imagine how your country club friends will react when you're banned from school grounds. You wouldn't dare, Margaret hissed. Try me, I said. I've spent weeks being polite, being understanding. Those days are over. Later that evening, as Mike and I watched Tommy play in the backyard, my phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. I suppose I owe you an apology. No, I replied. You owe Tommy an apology for dragging him into adult drama, confusing him about his family, and putting your own wants above his needs. Her response came quickly. You're right. I'm sorry. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. 2 weeks later, we celebrated Tommy's science fair win with a small family dinner. No surprise guests, no hidden agendas, just us. Mom, Tommy asked as I served dessert, can you teach me how to make a chocolate volcano cake next time? I caught Mike's smile across the table, a real one, not the strained, nervous ones he'd been wearing lately. Of course, sweetie, I said. Some traditions are worth keeping in the family. As I looked around the table, I realized something important. Sometimes protecting your family means being willing to fight for it, even if that means standing up to the people who think they're fighting for it too.